I would like to introduce our two guests today. We are so excited to have them join us. So we have Elder Marcel Paul with us. Marcel Paul is a proud family man with 6 children, 16 grandchildren, and a loving wife with whom he has shared his life with for the past 35 years. A fluent Cree speaker, Marcel has learned the cultural and traditional ways from his grandfather from a very young age. Additionally, Marcel served 9 years as a council member and has a degree from the University of Saskatoon in lands management, where he graduated with a 90% average. He has and will always continue to be a strong advocate for First Nations peoples and their rights, and passes these teachings on to his children and his grandchildren. A skillful negotiator, Marcel has concluded some of the historic land claims and other claims for his nation during his tenure as a council member and as the land's director. Marcel credits his teachings and knowledge to his grandfather and many of the elders who have since passed, and holds these teachings very near and dear to his heart, believing that partnerships need to be mutually respectful and beneficial. Marcel will continue to be an advocate for First Nations people now and for future generations. So welcome, Elder Marcel. We are so excited to have you join us.
Hey.
Thank you. Our second speaker and presenter today is Marcel Arcand. And so Marcel Arcand has been working in the economic development field since 2023 and has been active in creating awareness and protecting Indigenous...
2003.
Oh, what did I say?
2023.
Oh, geez. You've been working in you've been working in the future. All right, let's start this again. Has been working in the economic development field since 2003 and has been active in creating awareness and protecting Indigenous history and rights. During his career, Marcel has received many awards and accolades and completed numerous significant projects in various locations across Western Canada. Currently in his final year for the Masters of Business Administration program through Simon Fraser University, Marcel maintains a 3.6 GPA and an excellent attendance record. Marcel's true passion is economic development and the exciting challenges it brings regarding building opportunities and partnerships that are there for the benefit of all. One aspect of that Marcel always focuses on where he works, either full-time or in his consulting endeavors, is the value of creating strong working relationships that transcend standard norms and evolve into long-lasting, true partnerships. In his spare time, Marcel enjoys spending time with his family and continuously improving their home and yard. As well, Marcel is an avid writer, teeming with ideas, who would like to pursue script writing and eventually motion pictures. So welcome, Marcel. We're excited to have you join us.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody.
And I would also like to say too, congratulations, Marcel. Marcel is just been appointed as the CEO of the Mikisew. Sorry, Marcel, I'm killing
Mikisew.
Mikisew Cree Nation. First Nation, sorry. And so congratulations on that new appointment. And again, we're just excited to have you both join us. So really just want to do a quick introduction about, you'll notice that all of us are wearing orange shirts. So obviously this is in honor of the day tomorrow with recognition of the residential schools. So just want to make that acknowledgement. And then maybe Marcel, can I just go over to you to read your poem dedicated to that?
Yes, thank you very much. I consider myself a branch from a tree of strength. My mother had went to a residential school, so I wrote this in mind with all the survivors who were able to come home, and as well never forget the ones that didn't make it home. And this poem is untitled. On that day, our children are taken from home. On that day, the resolve of a nation tested, shown. On that day, pain is felt deep within the heart. On that day, the ripples of pain start. On that day, the people begin to heal. On that day, love and only love is what is real. On that day, broken hearts are on the mend. On that day, our people remember when. To walk the red road, we all are finding a way, but we must never forget it all began on that day. Thank you.
Hey, hey.
Thank you so much. That was profound. And so we also want to offer acknowledgement to all of our First Nations peoples, all of our Métis peoples, and all of our Inuit peoples across the country, the province, as well as across all lands. And with that, I would like to pass over to Elder Marcel to share an opening prayer and then to talk a bit about the true meaning, spirit, and intent of the Sacred Treaties. Elder Paul.
Good to hear it from all of you. I hope you're having a good day. Marcel Arcand has given me protocol to start the meeting with a prayer. So I'm going to pray in my language, the way I was taught by my grandfather through our culture, so that we can have a good meeting and a good understanding of what we're trying to do here and where we're going to go. Makamimu, Tamagano, Nani Kano Apmani, and Ano Mota, Himupi Ekota. Yaga Kyogo Muta, Yotuskian, and the Shogoma Stixo squats, Nitina Ganuskaya. Minaka Kyogo, Wigiato Muta, Kyogo Muta, Kitaskinio, Itmaxin, Itmagano. Oh, you are Kakyok and the Shogomoso squats. How Kista Gomosomak. En peto muta stima en shogoma so squats. How kyo the patient? How gisto ma peso? How gisto the mushmixina piot and piatikia and shogomanian? How gisto the mushmixina piomustos? How gisto the mushmixina piosini? Kista no to go tayokan. Itamagano na ni kano up mao muta nianan. Yo mupi eko muta no chotaya ota. Kyoka kyoka musho makan shogoma stikso squacho muta. Itamagano tapwe. Kya on the shogoma so squatch kakyok nianan in the shok showing. Kai seek so nianan kakyoko muta neheo. Tamagano tapwe. Kya on the shogoma stikso squatch. Oh, hi, na skuntin. Okay, so now we're going to go into the slide. Is that my understanding?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, the first page there. Why we chose September 29th. Orange Shirt Day is tomorrow. For all the people, First Nations people, all the Indigenous people across Turtle Island, across the United States and Mexico. Our goal is to spread the message of unity and togetherness, going forward for a better tomorrow for all people. It is incumbent on us all to use our hearts and transition me thinking into we thinking, turning the M upside down to a W, me to we. It's so important that we understand that. Here is a symbol of friendship. The treaty medallion represents quite a bit in regards to the the picture that you see there. You see the sun shining. You see the grass that they stand on is growing. You see the river behind them that is flowing. It's a true symbol of friendship that we're going to share the land. During the mid to late 1800s, the Queen sent representatives to what is now Canada to enter into treaties with the nations already there. These became what's known as the numbered treaties, and nations agreed to share the land with the European settlers via the Queen for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow. Nations never agreed to cede, surrender, or to sell their land. It was understood that sharing the land was paramount for future generations of the unborn. The First Nations held the treaties as a sacred covenant between two nations and strongly believed these to be sacred because the Creator was present at this sacred event when we smoked the pipe on that day. The foundational beliefs, our sacred lands, are what our people refer to as Turtle Island, all across the country. Our lands are only borrowed, and we must remember that our connection to the land is our link to tomorrow generations. We need approval from the unborn to ever sell our land. We are merely passing through. What legacy are we going to leave for the unborn to come? How will we be remembered is so important. Our thinking has always been generational. We think and plan for 7 generations. Based on the treaty medallion, there is a connection to economic prosperity because our ancestors knew that Mother Earth would provide for the people. This is the importance of protecting Nutugutayukan, Mother Earth. That's how you say that in our language. One must be careful on how we abuse her and how we use her. The economic prosperity is spelled out in the treaty. The NRTA of 1930 that was transferred to the provincial governments, that's what pays the Indian bill. Because we agreed to share the depth of a plow, which is 6 inches. All the resources under that 6 inches belongs to us, but we never get our share. $13 billion surplus in Alberta province this year. And you want to talk about economic prosperity so that we can take care of our people, give them good, adequate housing, give them good water, sewer, and all the stuff that we need to survive in today's society. The mechanisms and all that are there. We need to view Mother Earth as living, breathing entity with a spirit that protects and nurtures us as a people. If we hurt our mother, Nutugutayukan, by contaminating her, cutting her hair, and when the last tree is cut down, elders used to tell us, can we eat our money? We need to be careful what we do to our mother, because that's where we all come from. The foundational beliefs is continued based on the teachings of the medicine wheel. One can see the cycle of life and what it represents and is composed of the following. The four directions, north, south, east, and west. The four seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter. The four elements of a human, spiritual, physical, emotional, and mental. The four elements of nature, fire, water, earth, and wind. The four main animals, the eagle, the bear, the wolf, and the buffalo. The shape of the medicine wheel represents the cycle of life in which we all are in as a people. Makamimok. In our language, what makamimok means is keep going. We are so very grateful and encouraged by the Alberta Chamber of Commerce participating in the recognition of the Indigenous people of this land. I got the wrong slide here, and I must have mixed up my papers. So we'll go back and to this slide. So you look at the pictures that are there. The sun. It represents a baby newborn. The grass that grows is a baby to a child, to an adolescent, to an adult, to an elder, back to Nutugutayokan, Mother Earth. The blood that flows, the river, is the blood to our treaty parents and all the people in the world. Treaty 6, excerpt, 1876. Our ancestors were in ceremony for many days, seeking guidance. During the treaty negotiations in Fort Edmonton in 1877, they were given visions from the spirit world that were relayed to the Queen's representatives, which were then misinterpreted by the agents of the Crown. The Crown represents three crowns: the federal crown, the provincial crown, and the crown corporations. They're all connected all the way back to the Queen. Our understanding is of the sun shining, representing a new baby shining bright like the sun. The grass that grows is the growth of that baby to an adolescent, to an adult, to an elder, and returning back to Mother Earth, Nutugutayokan. The river that flows is the blood from that baby's parents since time immemorial. This is our connection to the land and why we hold the land sacred, because we are the land. I jumped ahead of myself to Makamimo. Here's Makamimo Kumota. So when we go to forgiveness, is the foundation of reconciliation. There's no future in the past, only teachings of the past. So we don't make the same mistake going forward into the future. I forgive and I set myself free. We must always remember the past so that we do not repeat it ever again, and to remember and pay respects to those who suffered to live on Mother Earth before us, such as residential school, students that didn't make it home. We would like to acknowledge the efforts of previous Prime Minister Harper, and the continued efforts of Prime Minister Trudeau towards the efforts of reconciliation. Additionally, we would like to acknowledge the efforts of Pope Francis and the trip he made to Canada to apologize to the survivors of the residential schools, the 60 scoop, and other derogatory government and church-sanctioned hardships against our people. While the efforts are not perfect, we can continue to work together to implement true reconciliation. Based on the true meaning, spirit, and intent of sacred treaties that were entered into over 145 years ago, we understand, and the elders always told us, that we need to develop a treaty act. The 27 rights, provisions, articles that were promised were never followed under treaty. The answer to true reconciliation is with all the people, and we must collectively unite our hearts, our minds, to create a path of true partnerships for our generations that are watching and yet to come. Utilizing existing tools today for tomorrow. There have been many efforts to acknowledge and honor the nations that have been here since time immemorial. And we can use these powerful documents as a starting point to build on towards reconciliation. This includes, but is not limited to, the Sacred Treaties, the 27 rights, articles, and provisions, the sacred named and territorial treaties, the sacred wampum belt treaties, and the 1970 Red Paper, Citizens Plus. Indian Association of Alberta stopped the white paper that was implemented by Elliott Trudeau in 1969. The Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples report, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the TRC 94 calls to action. This could be a good starting point towards building a treaty act for true spirit and intent of reconciliation. This is the slide I was talking about, Makamemo. We need to keep going. The future, the exit is now, and it's here. We are so very grateful and encouraged by the Alberta Chambers of Commerce participating in the recognition of the Indigenous peoples of this land. Our hearts are filled with joy, and we acknowledge the efforts of today's participants and urge you to continue learning about our people and our history from our perspective. You all are on the right path, and we will continue to support and work with you as long as you would like us to participate with you. We encourage you to spread the message as best as you can to your colleagues, to your friends, and to your loved ones. It is important that our younger generations learn the importance of our collective future and that we must continue building it together. We must follow our path no matter where it goes. Strength in unity, unbreakable like many arrows. Nashkumtin, that means thank you. We're happy to participate in any way we can to help to build the true meaning of reconciliation for our people. We'll only ask for our share, for what we do, what we know, what we were told. Oral testimonies of our elders are blueprinted in our minds by many band meetings in every nation across the land. We must understand these things and try to work for a better tomorrow so that nobody lives in hardship. Nobody is without water, sewer, roads, or any things that we need today. When you look at the PISM, PISM means the sun and the moon. Tipskau PISM means the moon. Gisagau PISM means the sun. But they're one. And when you look at the picture and you see the transition there, where the sun is saying good night to the moon and the moon is saying hello to the sun. That line right there is my name, Wasis. What Wasis means is I live in two worlds because I have a white father and an Indian mother. It also means brightness, just breaking into the day or breaking into the night. That's what my Indian name means. Natamskat na kakyo. I thank you, all of you, na skumtin, for listening to me today. Hi, hi.
Thank you so much, Elder Paul. We just so genuinely appreciate you joining us, and your insight and wisdom is truly appreciated. What we're going to do to the group is we're going to kind of do a broader Q&A at the end. But Elder Marcel, I have a question for you. You talked about several of the different documents in terms of the Sacred Treaties, the 1970 Red Paper, the UN Declaration, etc. And your comment was it's a good starting point for the true spirit and intent. So as an organization that represents businesses across the province, could you just share with us your thoughts on how can we as an organization, as a group of business owners, as leaders in our communities, really support that true spirit and intent of, walking, together towards the future, which is the title of our event today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in terms of how we can support that process more fulsomely and genuinely.
When I talk about that slide, all those documents, there's been many attempts. But because of elections, things change. Somebody else gets in. So we go a different road. If we could sit down and understand those documents and get our technicians and our legal people to help build this, whatever you want to call it, a format or whatever you want to name it, to real, true spirit and intent of reconciliation. And our nations across all the land and all the people will start to understand all we ask for is our share. We never get it. When you look at the budgets that come down to the Indian affairs, they can call their names whatever, ISC, whatever, they keep changing their name. But at them days, when I remember growing up and all the hardships, the chiefs, because my grandfather was a chief for 2 decades. He had a hard time and he would cry sometimes. He would pray that people would understand all we want. Those are good starting points to start to build something that will work with the next slides that you will see. we sit down as a people. What can you do for us? And what can we do for you? And put it down. And once it's signified and approved, that is the way that we all understand. I know right now everyone is administering under the Indian Act. The Indian Act is a breathing, living document. It suppresses us. It holds us back. And all we want to do is help. When you look at industry, they come and they give us a few dollars and then they put in their pipelines. That's what you call the crown corporations. And I talked about the 3 crowns. Those crowns are all connected because in 1982, the Queen transferred us to Canada. And we started to work and build on these things. We've done so much work. That's why all these papers are sitting there. But we never get that opportunity to continue to finish because of all the elections that happen, different governments, different changes. If we could find one way or a way that what we want from our standpoint as a nation and as a people, so that we can truly build a better tomorrow for the unborn that are yet to come. Hey, hey.
Thank you so much, Elder Paul. And so, Elder Marcel, sorry. And now, Marcel, I will pass on to you.
Okay, thank you, Shauna. I'd like to say good morning to everybody. Thank you for your time and your attention. It's very important that, with reconciliation that we look at all aspects. There are various aspects and there are various Indigenous experts in various fields that, can provide assistance and guidance. The whole idea around this is education and awareness, but also following that up with action. It's great to talk and it's great to share the knowledge and, stuff like that. But, we need to start getting more, specific and crafting out actual processes and stuff that can be implemented. So without further ado, I'll talk about my presentation. So one of the things that we're learning is within Indigenous Economic Framework is we need to kind of take a look at a holistic approach, including the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the social, and the financial aspects of, a person, a family, a community, a society. We need to really start making sure that, have we ever asked, like, how are you doing? How are things? So, we're looking at data and interpretation of data from a different perspective as well through an Indigenous lens. So as you can see there, that's visually represented with the charts there, and in the indication of the heartbeat. Taking that more human, realizing that we are human beings, and we need to embrace each other as such, and we're all part, of a bigger system. But the parts of that system need to be healthy in order for it to, function and serve all people and be cognizant of future generations. So some of the stuff that Elder Paul talked about is health is wealth, and the standard of living for Indigenous peoples, across this country, especially the more isolated communities. There's a very significant lack of, infrastructure, whether that's water, power, sewer, gas, internet. It does two things. It increases the standard of living for the people who live in these areas and all across, North America. But it also promotes opportunities for investment. It creates a business investment ready environment. One of the other things too that Elder Paul talked about is the relationship with Alberta So we're not included in annual funding. There is an entire ministry set up for Indigenous peoples, Métis and Inuit, but it's all target-based, and he talked about the abundance of resources and, the fact that the resources belong to us, and we're asking for a share. We're not asking for taxpayers' dollars, public monies, however it's termed by, provincial and federal governments. Our ancestors had the foresight to know that Mother Nature would provide for the Indigenous people, and our ancestors did not want to, be a burden to the Queen in terms of cost, because the Queen essentially was setting up implements and infrastructure through various institutions for European settlers. And our ancestors, knew that Mother Nature, would provide. So somewhere along the lines, especially with the 1930 Natural Resources Transfer Act, those were muddied, I guess, to put it nicely. Some of the investment and the improvements of standard of living for Indigenous peoples, especially in isolated territories, the list here outlines where this can come from. And if you notice on this list, there's no mention of taxpayers' dollars. So that's not what we're asking for. We're asking for our share of our oil and gas royalty revenues. And Elder Paul talked about, we agreed to share above that 6 inches. So, you're talking timber, and all various kinds of resources, that we can work together and promote a higher standard of living, but also, an environment of business investment. And, what it's going to lead to is what, it's going to increase everybody's standard of living. The benefits are going to ripple out into all walks of life. Also looking at carbon royalty revenues, municipal, provincial fees, permits, licenses, etc. Acknowledging that, municipalities are, essentially, and provincial governments are essentially issuing permits on our lands, on our traditional lands, where we used to hunt, trap, fish, and gather. We also, we need to start co-authoring policies that affect us. The paternalistic, here's a policy, what do you think type of approach is just not working. I think everybody knows that. And, our capacity has increased significantly in terms of education and that westernized foundational start of this type of work. We've got a lot of Indigenous experts in many fields right now that, can be utilized. And I think that now is the time, as Elder Paul talked about. So the other thing too is with the First Nations Development Fund. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that. I'm sure some of you are. But essentially, nations who own casinos, 40% is taken by Alberta. And it equates to about 1.2, 1.3 billion. I think maybe a little more, a little less, depends on the economy, that goes directly to Alberta from the Indigenous casinos. And from the non-Indigenous casinos, we receive zero back, other than target programs like community facility enhancement program and stuff. But if you ask me, $1.3 billion is pretty expensive for a casino license, and nations already had their own systems of gaming and economic development prior, to 1905 when Alberta was created. So there's definitely some political realignment that needs to happen. And with territories, provinces, and the feds essentially adopting UNDRIP and the 94 calls to action from the TRC, we need to be at those tables and co-authoring this stuff. For 60 years, the gross domestic product, or GDP for short, has been the yardstick by which the world has measured and understood economic and social progress. But it doesn't look at the individuals, the connections to their families. If a guy's busy, has 10 million in his bank account, okay, but is he happy? Is he a positive role model for his family? Is he spending time with his kids? So when we reanalyze how we're looking at data and, you know, variables and formulas and integers and formulas and stuff like that, we need to really start reconnecting with our human spirit. So that's kind of what this, you know, is leading to. And the Indigenous Economic Framework, there's a lot of experts that can help build this from an Indigenous lens, but with the mindset of everybody and with the mindset of tomorrow, future generations. This quote here was from Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel Prize winning economist. And, you know, the evolution of thought since then, you know, it's profound. And I think now is the time to capture it. And I think we're in a good position for First Nations, nations like Mikisew, and, you know, some of the nations that are more involved in the resource development, the extraction of resources from the Nutugu Tayokan, as Elder Paul talked about, our Mother Earth. Now is kind of the time to, you know, strike while the iron's hot. You know, we're ready, willing, able, but it's got to be, the terms have to be jointly discussed and agreed upon. It can't be Alberta, these are the terms, or Canada, these are the terms. It's not working. It's not getting us anywhere. So if you have a look at this slide here, and this is what I'm talking about, decolonization of data and frameworks and stuff like that. If you take a look at this formula, does it talk anything about how healthy a community is, how healthy the people are? You know, what is the social issues that are not represented? Is it always going to be just dollar cents? You know, we need to start looking at a holistic aspect of who we are as human beings and the footprint that we're going to leave for tomorrow. You know, essentially, you all, I'm sure some of you, all of you, if not all of you, have children. Well, at some point, you're going to have grandchildren, you know, so we need to be aware of that. And we need to be cognizant that, you know, the footprints create a path, and we need to create a path for tomorrow. The gross domestic product measures the output of our work, but it says nothing about the nature of that work and whether it is worthwhile or fulfilling. Now, Nicola Sturgeon was the first minister of Scotland, definitely a trailblazer in you know, an imperialistic environment like Scotland. And we're kind of used to the same, you know, environment. But things are evolving, things are changing. And, you know, we need to be jointly co-authoring that change and working together as was represented, the original spirit and intent of treaty represented in that medallion with the handshake as a symbol of friendship. Together, living in harmony, planning tomorrow, you know, through the Indigenous Economic Framework is, again, one that's going to encapsulate everybody, and it's going to, you know, think generational and beyond quarters and annual reports. So here you see a typical logic model, very, you know, just standard, right? So what can we do, you know, of all the experts sitting here and listening, what can we do to change this logic model, you know, to start thinking about tomorrow and to do it in a real way? You know, corporate Canada, you know, there's a lot of great things that are said, but at the end of the day, it's about profits. How do we change that thinking, that mindset? Some companies are starting to embrace people, planet, and profit, with profit kind of being the third. And that's an interesting model, you know, I think that can be enhanced and built on with the input from the Indigenous experts and leaders in you know, the all across the country. If the government cannot create happiness for its people, then there is no purpose for the government to exist. So as you can see that date, this is not new. This has been around for quite a while. But I think the institutions and, you know, for lack of a better phrase, the powers that be, they're starting to realize that, you know, the top-down approach it's not working anymore. They're starting to see effects on the social aspect and stuff, the mental health aspects. And, here's a chance, for everybody to be champions of tomorrow, and doing it today. When I look at Mikisew, I see a lot of opportunity here for corporate Canada resource developers to amend their own perception and look at themselves in the mirror when they think about the duty to consult. So the duty to consult is a minimally legal requirement. So if you want to talk about promoting investment and stuff and everybody benefiting, I think that minimum standard, it really needs to be elevated, not only there, but in a lot of different areas as well. Indicators also arise from values. We essentially measure what we care about, and they create value. We care about what we measure. This was Danella Meadows. I suggest you guys have a look at this book. It was very, the views in this book really expanded, and they could provide, a foundation to build on. But essentially, all the nations, they've been saying that for years, generations. Talking about, the holistic approach. And once we get, the experts at the table, that's when we start getting into the details. The general concept of the Indigenous Economic Framework and what that would look like and how that would be embraced, how that would be rolled out across various institutions, is conceptual at this point. But once everything is agreed upon, then I think then we can start getting our work done, putting our minds together, and start getting into the details on exactly how that is going to roll out. So how can we decolonize well-being measurement? How do we measure well-being, in the place where we work, in our community, in our nations? How do we measure this performance? Who are designing these? Is it community-led, driven, and inspired? In my experience, and Mikisew does the same thing, they always meet with their people. There's always, there's never a top-down approach. There's always grassroots up approach. Every nation that I've ever seen and worked with, they've always worked with their people, and they make their decisions accordingly. So what number, and this is the analyzing we do on data and what data tells us and stuff like that. What number tells us that we have received respect from, our peers and stuff? What is the value of care for our species that, provide us food and all that stuff, right? How do we measure the impact of our actions on the equal balance of life? And this gentleman here, Winston Watney, he's been thinking about this for years. And again, he's one of them Indigenous experts that we can tap into, along with knowledge keepers like Elder Paul and others. There's quite a bit of us, so definitely I urge governments at all levels and corporations at all levels to please reach out, So here, this is where we get into kind of the start of the framework built on, essentially these 4 pillars. Well, the spiritual, the cultural connection, that is for each individual, I think, to decide whether or not, they want to make that connection is up to them. But with the emotional aspects, the safety of the future, the physical, the health outcomes, I've always said that, if a guy has $5 million in a bank, but is in a hospital sick, what went wrong? Is it, lifestyle? Is it mental health? So looking at it from that angle to make sure that the individual contributes to their families and they're good role models and they're contributing to their communities and nations, because all this health is going to equal wealth. And we talk more along the lines of wealth distribution than accumulation. From an Indigenous lens, you don't need 3 moose if one will feed your family. If you have 3 moose, well, our people would go and share, give it to elders, and make sure everybody's taken care of. That's kind of the the lens, I guess, that we look at it from. But to interpret that into, Western tools and instruments like finance and all that stuff, that's where we need to collaborate, and our expertise is ready, willing, raring to go. Building a new measurement into planning. So the community consent. So here, again, I talked about some of the paternalistic approaches that were, imposed on us for many years. Plan with the people, not for them. We need to look at the environment, the culture, the education, the health, safety, and leisure time, because ultimately it's for the children, it's for the kids. We got to think about that and transition our thinking. Our day-to-day serves tomorrow, and who we are today, it's going to create a path for tomorrow for the kids. They're watching. You're the example that they see every day, and then informing partners, making sure everybody's aware. The communication. That's one of the things that is really being embraced right now with Mikisew, is they're really big on the communication aspects, and they want it strengthened up. They want to make sure that everybody and the people are informed as to what's going on. As you know, a pretty big deal was signed yesterday. A lot of you may know that. I don't want to speak on it because it's not official yet, but I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about. But with that, I thank you for your time and listening, and hope that this is the first step. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marcel. So greatly appreciated. And I would just say to everybody on the call that please log any questions that you have. We actually have quite a bit of time. We still have a half hour. So you have these two fantastic resources at your disposal to ask any of those questions that you're needing answered in order to move this work forward in your local communities. And I think on that note, Marcel, I would just maybe put this to you because you talked about this a little bit, but how do we better engage our municipalities, our municipal stakeholders? Because a lot of this work is done regionally. So how do we better engage, all of those stakeholders regionally, municipally, more in that development of a really robust and respectful Indigenous framework?
Well, I think Elder Paul kind of talked about it in his prayer, with the open minds and open hearts. So, in my role with as a CEO for Mikisew Cree, I'm definitely going to be knocking on the door of the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo. I've seen this started all the time before, but the consistency, I think, is key. So municipalities as well, they need to embrace the partnerships and look at it from, a perspective of, a potential investment partner. If we look at nations as potential points of investments, like the resources are huge, the implications and the benefit and contributions to that province economy, it's huge, so and then we can work on that collaboratively. And I think that's, an important message, is that as municipalities, you really need to reach out to your nations and do so with the mindset of an open mind, open heart, but thinking generationally and growth. There's a lot of tables, like the Capital Region Board. They essentially decide water and all that stuff. Why are there no nations at that table? All these different things. We need to be present. We need to have our perspectives heard and incorporated, so yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that, Marcel. And maybe I'll put this question to both of you. So Elder Paul, if you want to jump in on this one too, it kind of connects to the previous question, but so what is the best way to do that? So what is the best way to, to your point, genuinely connect with the various Indigenous communities so that we can forge and build these better relationships?
like to comment on that. You know, I think we said it many, many times during this meeting. Consulting is a key word. And how the duty to consult is like M&M Consulting to assist you. We can go to nations and offer the tobacco to start the meet with the leadership, because the leadership, they have the answers of the grassroots people. Every one of us as nations have met with our people, time immemorial. And we strive to try to get a better tomorrow with the little that we get. True spirit and intent of reconciliation, this is a starting point. We can help you to get to those points, to use those tools that I mentioned in my slide, and there are many others, to have an understanding of our share. We're not asking for trillions and trillions of dollars. We're just asking for our share from each provincial sector. And we can truly, under the treaty, have economic prosperity. Instead of having just one casino, and then we got to share the resources through FNDF. There is a lot of ways, and if the mindset and the willingness is there, and there is a way, but we need to put our minds and our hearts together to make a better understanding of the Red Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Marcel, do you want to elaborate more?
I think he explained it pretty good.
Excellent. So I'm really interested in, learning a little bit more about the idea of how do we actually, as community leaders, again, as business leaders, there's a huge shift when you think about, going people, planet, profit versus the traditional business model, which, as you already stated, Marcel, is profit. So I would really appreciate any of your insights around, how do we actually make that foundational shift? And, how as leaders do we start having those conversations more robustly? And I ask that question just because, as I said at the beginning, this is something that at ACC, we're just so committed to getting this strategy in place that we can actually start changing from the rhetoric of it and saying that we're doing it to actually doing it and seeing tangible results in that engagement process.
Well, I think, that's a good question. But I think we need to look at the impact of the local economies. I mean, I know a big message from the chambers is shop local and all that stuff. But when we look at the life cycle of products, if we're manufacturing and refining products and stuff like that locally, I think it creates less of a carbon footprint. So for example, in one of our courses, we looked at, plastic spoons are bad and all that stuff. But when we actually start digging into where the plastic is, all these different ingredients and stuff, where they're actually mined from, and then you think about the transportation and all that stuff, if we can keep a lot more of that localized, then we're essentially having a bigger impact on our local economies, right? And I think we can, transition that mindset. And I know some of the technological stuff is a little bit trickier because of, the various elements and stuff that they use for that. But you're always going to have, that supply chain. But the more localized we can get it, the bigger economic impact it's going to have on, everybody, right? And businesses, right? Especially with chambers of commerce and, the collective economic power of chambers, right? So.
Thank you, Marcel. Elder Paul, do you have anything you want to add to that at all?
Can you repeat the question again?
It was just about, this idea of, as a business community, the shifting of, that idea that we look at the people first, then the planet, and then the profit. And how do we start really effectively impacting that shift?
Well, Marcel kind of talked about, he hit the nail on the head. So just to add to some of that, I mean, there's a lot of our people that strive to have their own little tiny businesses, little small business. And if they could be given that opportunity to some of those aspects that Marcel talked about, and then more, and help them grow so that they too can also individually prosper. When it comes to the nation itself, we need to all sit down, like I said earlier, and come up with ways so that we all can benefit, not just only certain people. If you have everybody participating and understanding in layman's terms what we're going to do, what we're about to do, and what can we do to help all the local economy, it can be done. There's no such word as can't. My grandfather always told me that. You have to find a way. There's no other way. I went hunting this morning and I saw a nice bull moose on my reservation here, but he didn't give me a shot. Now, if I would have got 3 moose, I would have shared, because one moose would provide for my family because winter is coming, as I talked about in my slide about the seasons. So we have to seek, we have to gather. That's what it states in the treaty. And if we do that, then we can all prosper, sharing everything that the Mother Mutugutayuk and Mother Earth provides for us. We can do it, and I know we can, but the willingness needs to be there from all the government, all the industry, all the businesses, and our people, and all the people, so that all of us can live in harmony on Mother Earth. Hi, hi.
Thank you. So here's a question from the group. Many new or renewing policies, both provincial and federal, now include Indigenous consultation listed in recommendations. Is there more meaningful ways or language we can use to ensure true partnership in policy creation and advocacy?
Well, I think with that's a very good question, and I think with that, specific to Indigenous nations, reach out. Have one sitting there helping, guiding you when you're crafting this stuff. And you'll see that first and foremost it'll be protocol, right? Offering of tobacco and stuff, and then. But yeah, definitely seek out the expertise, and then have them at the table. We've said that, for many years. If we were at the table, it would prevent further fueling of the legal industry that has become the relationship with First Nations and the ground. Essentially, the approach is essentially just creating, or it has created and is just fueling a legal industry. If we're at the table though, it's different, right? So if we're actually co-authoring these legislations and policies and procedures. Yeah, so thank you.
Elder Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I always tell my son, how come we don't have First Nations chambers? How come we don't have Indigenous chambers? How come we can't sit at the same table? Whatever policy comes out, or legal document or whatever, how come our people are not sitting there? Not so much with a handout, but how is it going to help us? And I think by starting an Indigenous chamber and working with the chambers of the provinces right across Turtle Island and other countries, I don't know how other countries operate, but I know Canada and I know the provincial sector and system. In regards to that, if we could have that Indigenous chamber seat or seats because of all the treaties and all our traditional territory. This is all our traditional territory, Turtle Island, all of it. And I know the provincial government on duty to consult tried to give us a mapping of where our traditional territory is. I told the people, it's Turtle Island. If I want to exercise my right to shoot that moose in Ontario, that is my right. I mean, people gotta quit being so tunnel visioned, I guess we'll say, and start opening their minds and start to understand what our forefathers and our foremothers have done. You look at the Royal Proclamation, 1763, the British North American Act of 1867. I mean, those are all living documents. And the governor is supposed to be our spokesperson as Indigenous people. So these are the things that I don't understand. Why is it not Indigenous people participating at all these tables, levels of whatever bureaucracy that is there? Hi. Thank you.
Thank you. And words to definitely take to heart as we go to this session. So as individuals need to learn more about the Sacred Treaties and Indigenous Economic Framework, do you have any resources that we can read or watch to continue learning? Either of you that you could direct us to?
There are several, but one thing though, you have to be very cognizant of what you're reading and understand where it came from. And Elder Paul talked about the misinterpretation of the treaties. So there's the actual written document, and then there's the oral testimonies of our elders. So we put our stock, our value, our beliefs in the oral testimonies. They've been passed on for generations, all down the line to today. So one of the things, if you take a look, and if you read Treaty 6, it will say that, nations agree, cede, surrender, forever hold harmless, that legalese, verbiage, right? But that's not what we agreed to. It was misinterpreted by agents of the Crown. We agreed to share the land. We never ceded or surrendered or anything. A very interesting point and an example is that back when Prime Minister Harper was still the Prime Minister, there was a meeting at the United Nations Assembly in New York. And one of our chiefs had asked Prime Minister Harper to produce a deed of sale or a deed of transfer for Canada, that we gave our land and surrendered our land, ceded our land. And to my knowledge, that question is still on the table. It's not answered, and it never can be answered, because again, the oral testimony of our elders is we agreed to share. We never said we'd surrender our land ever. Thank you. So yeah, the source of your information is, and ask elders, there's a lot of elders and stuff, buy the tobacco, approach them, but there are, people who are more technical experts, technicians, what we call them. Those are people like myself or, whoever who understand the verbiage and the legalese writing and all that stuff, right? So, yeah, just be mindful of the source.
Thank you. Elder Paul, did you want to add anything to that?
He very, very well said what he said. It is the truth. You see, me, when I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to write anything down of the oral testimony. I had to remember and I had to blueprint it in my brain, all the thoughts. And as we speak, I hear the elders in the background talking to me, telling me, when you go to court, oral testimony is very good there. Well, they won't allow our oral testimony in court because they're afraid. And Marcel hit the nail on the head when he said, we never agreed to sell our land. It's still our land, and it's traditional territories. It's our reservations that we were forced to live into, I guess we'll say, for lack of better words. So when you look at the treaty, the land, 125 acres, up to a family of 5. Well, there's 8 of us. Where's the rest of my land? The reserves were supposed to grow. They never grow. Unless you have a treaty land entitlement claim of some nature, which like Alexander does. So we need to understand how we're going to work together to make a better tomorrow. We don't want Turtle Island back. We just want our share. We want to coexist. And the misinterpretation needs to be taken off the table and start fresh. And I think it was said in the meeting here, grassroots has always been told to the leaders. And even though I'm not sitting there in the office or elected official, I'm still a leader in this community. So I have to continue to hold my role as a leader, as an elder, as a father, and as a husband and a grandfather. And hopefully someday I get to see my great grandchildren. That's when I know I'm fully rich. That's what the elders used to tell us. I know I won't live long enough to see 7 generations, but through the bloodline and the grass that grows my babies, through the rivers that flow our blood, they will see my 7 generations. Like Marcel, Arcand there, he's my son. And I blueprinted all of this stuff that was blueprinted by my grandfather into him. So him going to school to understand the other side of the fence, as we say, so that we and the teachings that we gave him and the knowledge that he learned here working in Alexander and working for Mikisew, he'll have a better understanding. So as we go forward and he gets his degree, hopefully people like yourself, Shauna, to help us to get to those points. You have it. You have the power to do so. And I know you can, because I see it in your eyes, your heart, your mind, your soul, and your spirit, that you're willing to help. And we're willing to help. But together, we can have a starting point. And each Indigenous community will have their own. At some point, hopefully we can have one set way that we all agree that we're all going to prosper of Nutugutayokan, Mother Earth. Hi, hi.
Thank you. And yes, together we're all stronger. So Marcel, this is another question that's in chat. Marcel, I very much appreciate the addressing the physical and spiritual well-being into the economic measurements. What would be the first steps in getting this into a strategic plan? That's the first part of the question. And is there a formal model that could be shared and distributed?
So that's a very great point. Actually putting it on paper is, the next step, right? So initially, what I think would be a good starting point is to do an assessment of existing systems, existing, information that's out there, and then, putting the different lenses on it, and modifying and adjusting, the work plans, right? But yeah, definitely an assessment. So with something like this, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge out there, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm aware of that I know that can be resourced, right? And as long as the willingness is there, I think it could be, done, definitely done. But when you're analyzing these previous systems and this data and all this stuff, and you're formulating it into a strategic plan or a critical path to lead into a strategic plan, it just depends on the scope of how in depth you want to get with the various lenses. I mean, you could get right down into the nitty gritty and completely indigenize the whole thing, but that's not going to serve our partners as well, right? Like the non-Indigenous people. So we need to be cognizant and aware that we exist, and that, the one-upmanship is not the approach to take. We can walk, chew gum, text, we can, all this stuff. So we need to incorporate that. It's a lot of moving parts, but definitely with the right expertise and the right guidance from knowledge keepers and stuff like that, it can be done. I know, like, say, for example, like with my role as CEO for Mikisew, there's like 10 to 20 different projects that are on the go, like right now. And these are major projects, major things that I need to complete. So in my way of doing things, I don't do one, and have that sequence. I kind of need to be working on all of them, right? And produce the end result, which is a report to the Mikisew Cree leadership. Well, it's the same kind of thing here. There's a lot of different moving parts, but the right experts, we can encapsulate all that and put it into a critical path, and then leading into a very strong strategic plan that encompasses financial institutions, educational institutions, the business community, the appropriate levels of government, and all that stuff, right? So there's a lot of pillars that are going to create the bricks and mortar, so to speak.
It sounds like a co-creation opportunity to me,
It
actually.
is exactly what it is.
Yeah, in terms of how we can approach this, whether it be regionally or provincially or even nationally, the approach that we need to be more open to undertaking. So this next question is, so there's a labor shortage across the province, and data continues to show that Indigenous people are underemployed. So do you have any recommendations for our members and for the business community on how we can better engage and be equipped to provide those opportunities to Indigenous peoples?
So that's a two-part question. So one, I encourage business leaders to be mentors to Indigenous people and create that door for them to walk through, essentially. I really think that we need to, if anybody wants to talk to me about this, create a mentorship app for Indigenous people. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, well, I heard it loud and clear. So we already have a meeting scheduled, so we'll be talking about that as part of our meeting.
Okay. So yeah, but that's one idea. The other aspect is with Mikisew, because of the geographic location, I'm going to begin reaching out once I get kind of everything, get up to speed and get everything kind of rolling that I need to. I'm going to be reaching out to educational institutions and to mobilize the training, to bring it here rather than, sending them out until they're ready, until that that life skills, training happens to where it's an easier transition. Because I know the whole intent of treaty is for us to walk in two worlds, but the reality is not everybody is afforded that opportunity. So we need to create that opportunity for the young people, the young generations. And we need to make sure that we reach out to the educational institutions like the Kianos, the NATES, all these different institutions, the U of A's, and make sure that their training, their accreditation is portable and a click away.
Elder Paul, did you want to add anything on to that?
When we were growing up, we were always told that our treaty is portable. So if we want to go to school in the United States or in Mexico or wherever, the resources of this country would pay that bill. These pillars that are all sitting there collecting dust, such as some of the tools I mentioned, to build that bridge so that we can all understand how Indigenous people can prosper and non-Indigenous people can prosper, so that everybody can live in harmony and to be partners with all aspects of government, no matter what they are called. Right from the federal government to the provincial government, to the provincial sectors of the municipalities and the crown corporations on working and building, so that all Indigenous people can have the same as we leave the reserve. That's all I have to add to that. There's so many things that have been tried, but if you take all the good out of all the documents and you put them into the pillars to build that bridge, then I think we can have true spirit and intent of reconciliation. All we ever ask for is our share. That's all the elders always told us. Where's our share? We never get it. And we haven't got it since time immemorial, when we agreed to the signing of treaty through that medallion. These things are so important and sacred to us because the Creator gave us that. Through our cultural and our spiritual ways, they were handed down to us. But misinterpretation, and that's why we only listen to the oral testimony of our people. So we can work and we can all be happy when we go to sleep at night. Never ever think of me. It's too, how do you say that now? Too greedy, I guess we'll say in lack of better words. We have to think we. That's why we have family. We. So we have kids, grandkids, great-grandkids. That's we, us, Nianon, Niano, all of us. That's all I have to add to that. But Marcel hit the nail on the head when he talked about the pillars to build that bridge. And we're willing to help, all of us. So it's going to take a little time, but if we don't try, we won't know. Thank you. Hey.
Thank you. So this is going to be the last question, looking at time. We do have a bunch of other questions, and I just want to make a comment. We do have a note to action from our community and those on the call that, really, if ACC wants to develop an Indigenous framework, I sure hope there will be involvement from the Indigenous community in that program. And so I just wanted to make a comment that we're already engaging, and Marcel and I are having conversations about how we incorporate that really genuinely into the framework that we put together for ACC, for our chamber members, and for the business community at large. So I just wanted to address that because there was a bit of call to action there. So I just wanted to assure everybody that it's very much on our radar and very much one of our priorities.
So at our meeting, Shauna, on Halloween, should we dress up?
I think so. We'll be politically correct and not say anything about what costumes we should be wearing, but I think that would be a lot of fun because we have a very long agenda to go through. So I'm looking forward to that meeting, Marcel. So this is going to be the last question, and it kind of alludes, Marcel, to your comments about the announcement yesterday that there's a partnership with Athabasca Indigenous Investments and Enbridge, and that's for the 7 pipeline operations. So should this be viewed as a healthy partnership model chambers can refer to in our policies? So for instance, recommending partnerships with First Nations and Indigenous communities. And maybe I'm putting you a bit on the spot because it was just announced and you maybe don't have like the complete understanding of the overall framework, but would really like your feedback on that in terms of, you know, for us, a lot of it is about looking at how do we more authentically engage, and then what kind of models and strategies, maybe even at a higher level, we can put in place that will help when we get down to the granular level of actually engaging with the elders and, you know, with the history and the narrative in our local communities. So I'm just curious what your feedback on that would be, Marcel.
No, I think it's a great step. I mean, with Mikisew as part of that deal, it's a huge step for them, and you know they should be very, very proud. The current acting chief is actually expecting kind of, you know, a big influx of calls and stuff, and I'm sure she's going to get them. But one of our council members, Russell Kaskaman, was there. So you know it's definitely a great opportunity. As for taking that type of approach, I think we would need to customize it to fit the audience that we're working with through the chambers, the business owners, and the nations. I definitely don't want to, you know, create a cookie cutter process to where we're trying to, you know, fit, you know, a square peg in a round hole, right? You know, eventually it can happen, but we do need the right tools. So I think we could look at some kind of framework stuff and some foundational stuff, but it would definitely need to be specific to each nation. Like, I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable, crafting something that is going to impact every nation. And I'm only representing Mikisew, right? So I know I'm getting a good, strong assessment of what Mikisew needs and stuff. But again, you know, each nation will have their own gatekeepers, right? So adding a few more chairs at the table is not going to hurt, you know, when we're looking at the areas and looking at the nations that are in that area. Invite them, right? So.
Thank you, Marcel. So again, to both of you gentlemen, I cannot express my gratitude enough for you taking the time to share your knowledge and wisdom with us, share your experience with us, and help us move that needle forward in terms of truth and reconciliation. So thank you both, gentlemen. And Elder Paul, I believe I was promised a song, and I would love to let you close us out. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we're going to close out with Elder Paul. You're on mute, Elder.
I'm going to sing a song that was given to me by my grandfather. And it's a Sundance song. That is our highest church, I guess, is what you want to call it, for lack of a better term. And this song is focused on the tree in the middle that holds everything together. As we prosper and work together, I'm hoping And I'm praying that we can come up with something that will help all our people, help all the people in Mother Earth. By doing that, it's a good step to start. But if we don't sit down and meet and understand all the tools and the fundamentals that are there to build these pillars, to make that bridge happen, and we can build it together. So with this song, you will all feel comfortable, you'll feel relaxed, and then you'll start to understand a little bit, hopefully, of the Red Road, the Indigenous people of this country, of this world. So with that, I'll sing that song, and then I'll close with a closing prayer. So I'll close the meeting with a prayer now. Aha, mamutawinan, nanashkumtin, makamimok nianan kakyogi utoshkianota. Miwi mupi ekomuta kakyog nianan utayaota. Sogomastik sos kwas nianan. Nitinagan uskayak itamaksin itamaganunan. Nianan utoshkianan ututayaota. Nesogomaweo auskayak nitinagan. Kakyo komusomak nesogomastix oskatskistao minaniana. Haukyo tapesum, haukistao komal pehiso. Kista komusmixina piotn piatikia nesogomastix oskats nianan. Hagamusmixena piumstus. Haugista komusmixena piosini. Haugista nutogo tayokan. Kia kakyo komusomak nesogomastix oskats. Mina kyogi gagit ni heok itamaksin wista ne sogomakia kakyakowasak ushamak uchapanak. Hi nashkumtin. How. Thank you.
Thank you.